On Circumambulation, a lecture first presented by very excellent companion B. G. Patterson of Mount Morgan Royal Arch Chapter in 1943. Meteorologists have the right word. We Masons insist that when any moving has to be done, it is necessary to travel from the east to the west by way of the south, which is dignified but rather involved. Winds, however, move clockwise, and that certainly is a simpler way of putting it. We can say, therefore, that we circumambulate clockwise in our lodge rooms, for that correctly describes our progress, even in those degrees in which our movements are not perfectly rectangular, degrees like the Royal Arch and the Royal Arc Mariner. Ward tells us that there is 1 degree and 1 degree only in which our circumambulations are in the opposite direction. But since it is a degree about which few of us know anything, and which fewer of us still are ever likely to see, it hardly concerns us very much here in Queensland. But if we want to know why we circumambulate in this manner, meteorologists cannot help us at all. Our movements have nothing whatever to do with the weather or the winds. Haywood, however, has this. May one be permitted to fashion an explanation which builds on the fact that the candidate walks in harmony with the sun? To my mind, that is its point of greatest significance, even as it was evidently the original idea embodied. Let the sun represent the powers and the laws of nature, as in the ancient ceremonies. Let circumambulations be understood as an attempt to work in harmony with those powers and laws, and we see at once that the right gives us the secret of human accomplishment. To fight nature is suicide. To work in cooperation with her is power. To keep step with her cycles, to move in sympathy with her vibrations, that gives us the fullness of life. The sailor clasps his hand with her winds. The farmer adjusts himself to her chemic processes. The artist vibrates with the pulses of her beauty. The poet weaves her rhythms into his lines. The saint harmonizes himself with her laws as they rise in the soul. It is thus, and thus only, that we mount the stairs of life. So says Haywood, and all that is left for us to do is to hope most sincerely that Haywood is wrong. For, if each day the sun does appear to move from the east to the west by way of the south in the northern hemisphere, in this half of the globe its apparent path is from the east to the west through the north, and therefore Australian Masons are not walking in harmony with the sun. We are doing exactly the opposite. If it is thus, and thus only, that we mount the stairs to life, we would all seem to be on the wrong side of the escalator. Haywood is not alone in declaring that we are supposed to move in conformity with the apparent course of the sun. Others say exactly the same thing, though not in quite so felicitous language. If they are right, then we are all wrong, and all our lodge rooms and all our lodge ceremonies need altering. One is aghast at the changes that would be involved. Worse still, for many of us in Queensland, the position is very perplexing indeed. In all lodges, chapters, councils, call them what you will, circumambulations should be anti-clockwise throughout the year, except within the tropics, where they should be in one direction for part of the year, and in the other direction for the remaining months. When the winter is over, and the sun commences to move southward in its daily journey across the sky, as soon as it has passed overhead on its way to its midsummer position above the Tropic of Capricorn, our circumambulations should be clockwise, and should remain so until the sun has again passed overhead as it moves northward to its midwinter position over the Tropic of Cancer. For the balance of the year, tropical Queensland should move anti-clockwise like the rest of Australia. The director of ceremonies of each lodge, we assume, would be required to take solar observations on the afternoon before a meeting to determine whether his lodge had to move clockwise or anti-clockwise that evening. More perplexing still, once each year immediately on the tropic line and twice each year in all places north of it, the sun, for a few days, is vertically overhead at noon. Its apparent path across the heavens is directly from the east to the west. Should a lodge happen to meet when the sun is in this position, how then? Do all concerned move in a similar manner straight across the lodge room floor? It is only too obvious that we are going to find ourselves in various serious difficulties if we insist on taking too much notice of the conjectured symbolism of this part of our ceremonial. We are going to find it far more satisfactory to recognize that history and not symbolism directs our footsteps. We walk around our lodge rooms as we do because for thousands of years men in their religious rites have paced in this manner. Hierophants of pagan Greece and Rome, druids of pre-Roman Britain, and priests of ancient Asiatic cults all moved as Masons perambulate today. Those who first did this may have believed the sun to be a god or the visible embodiment of a god who made a daily tour of the heavens, beginning in the east and journeying to the west by way of the south, and reverently followed the same path. And, generation after countless generation has followed in their footsteps, unquestioningly and unthinkingly. If Masons of the past ever had any other grounds than custom for their clockwise journeyings, they were probably astrological rather than astronomical. We are really not too far removed from the days when astrologers thought, and men believed, that the sun and other heavenly bodies, with their conjunctions and their oppositions and their trines, really could influence humanity and human affairs. Rudyard Kipling's picture of Nicholas Culpeper in Rewards and Fairies is far from being a ridiculous caricature of a 17th century medical man, an astrologer-physician, who, about the year 1645, undertook to combat an outbreak of bubonic plague by observing the position of the planet Mars in the heavens. For when, in the year 1664, Robert Turner gave to the world his textbook entitled The British Physician, setting out in order all the herbs and plants then known to medical science, he was very careful to ascribe each plant to its own particular planet. Vervain and Jack by the Hedge to Venus, sweet marjoram and melitote to Mercury, bittersweet and centaury to Mars, and so on. For it was well understood that each herb owed its pharmaceutical properties to the influence of the planet to which it belonged. Men believed quite firmly in the ability of the heavenly bodies to control the affairs of men, and, because they believed this, they marked zodiacal signs and astronomical symbols on their lodge-room floors. Castells has an idea that somehow these zodiacal signs found their way onto the Royal Arch banners, whose designs a later age converted into tribal emblems. If only he were acquainted with the Scottish Royal Arch ritual, he would realise there are good grounds for thinking this. But, because men could walk around these signs in one direction only, our circumambulations had to be clockwise. The persistence of astrological ideas up to the time when modern masonry had its beginning is by no means impossible. There might have been men alive in 1717 who could remember when Robert Turner's book represented the very last word in medical knowledge. Or rather, they would have been alive, only that astrological medicine had an unfortunate tendency to reduce quite appreciably the average expectation of life in those days. But this leaves us just where we were. Our reasons for the east, south, west, north perambulations are still historical. The symbolism of them we must ignore. And, after all, it should suffice for us to know that we have these historical reasons for our ceremonial, whether we go back so many millenniums with Churchward to his solar cults, or whether we go no further than old Nick Culpeper with his house and his planets, moving from house to house like pieces at draughts. And as for the symbolism of it all, let us wait until someone adjusts it to our hemisphere.